Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best stealth archer build in Baldur's Gate 3. One of the characters that got a significant buff, or rather a bug fix, in patch 5 is the Assassin Rogue, which gained the ability to actually regain its action on the first round of combat, meaning that you can take an attack outside of combat, and then when combat starts, you'll be able to take another attack. This means that starting at level 3, the Assassin Rogue will be able to make 2 attacks in their opening round of combat, something that very few other characters in the game get. The only other characters in the game that can start making 2 attacks starting at level 3 are things like the Gloomstalker Ranger or the Berserker Barbarian, so that puts you in a fairly exclusive company in terms of very high damage output in the opening round. You also get automatic criticals against surprised enemies, so this build is going to be making use of that feature. However, in order to best maximize Rogue, we actually want a fairly heavily multi-classed build. If you've been watching my videos for a long time, you will recognize this build as an updated version of the best assassin in Baldur's Gate 3, one of my earlier build videos, but because I didn't complete the build skeleton in that video, I'm going to walk you through level by level. This is, I think, an excellent party member or solo for Tactician or Honor mode. In the higher difficulty modes, one of the best things you can be doing is these stealth-based ranged attacks, because it means that you're never in danger. So especially for Honor mode, having a stealth-based ranged attacker in your party lets you start every fight basically up one enemy, because you'll usually kill someone before combat even starts, and then also you will win initiative and probably drop a second enemy before the opponents even get a chance to act. So the purpose of this character is to take out priority threats, or if you're planning to solo, then you're just going to want to stay in stealth and kill everyone before combat starts, and without them knowing that you're there at all. I'm using Astarion as the example character, because of course for a stealth archer character that makes perfect sense to me, and also because his unique ability to gain a bonus to hit synergizes very well with this character, which will end up not maxing out its dexterity, so we want other sources of to hit bonus where possible. Alright, let's get right into building the character. So first up, we have to... let me actually reset this to our default stat spread so you can see what we're fixing. So you can see that this default stat spread both has 3 odd numbers and also has a bunch of stats that are just not useful at all for a rogue. So Astarion, I think, has one of the worst starting stat spreads. We can definitely fix that before we build this character. So we're going to get rid of all of this intelligence. We don't need any of that. Give him 14 wisdom, 16 dexterity, and 16 constitution, and then with our remaining 4 points, if you are a main character, you could put these into charisma to give you actually pretty decent dialogue skills. As a rogue with charisma, you can end up with pretty high skill checks just overall. Or if you are not a main character, you could place these into strength, giving you a little more mobility, because the jump distance is actually quite useful for a stealth character. This can allow you to get up onto high ground more easily without having to spend like a misty step or something like that in order to rain terror down on your enemies from a location they can't reach you from. If you are not on Honor mode, then you should highly consider taking 17 dexterity and planning to take Anti-Ethel's deal. But on Honor mode, I will say that that is something that you just can't rely on, because it's very easy to accidentally kill her and not be able to take the deal. So I would not take the odd stat spreads if you're playing on Honor mode. We just can't count on getting that. Alright. For our skills, of course, the only thing that we really need is Sleight of Hand and Stealth, and you're going to take expertise in both of those. I guess you don't actually need Sleight of Hand, but you're taking a dexterity-based rogue, so you definitely should grab Sleight of Hand. And of course, expertise in Stealth is core to the whole purpose of this build, which is to kill enemies from the shadows. Alright, let's take those skills and level up. At Rogue level 2, there's no decisions to make, but you do get a few things that are very important to the function of Rogue as a character class, being bonus action hide, dash, and disengage. All of these are super useful, especially for an archer rogue. So if you bonus action hide, then that will give you advantage on your next attack, and you should be able to find an easy place to hide. somewhere in the arena, because you will be able to attack from any angle, meaning that the bonus action hide will be very reliable for you, especially if you get your stealth check high, but in general you should be able to move out of enemy line of sight before hitting this and then still attack. This will let you apply your sneak attack over and over again because you can continue to cunning action hide and also make your attacks very reliable because you'll have advantage on every one of your attack rolls. Cunning Action Dash, of course, gives you a lot of mobility and lets you still attack in a turn that you double move, and Cunning Action Disengage is very useful for an archer because it stops enemy melee characters from shutting you down completely or getting attacks of opportunity against you. Use all of these abilities very heavily. They're extremely important to your kit, and I highly recommend you familiarize yourself with how they work and how to use them. At Rogue level 3, I talked about this already, but for a stealth-based archer character, the best pick, of course, is Assassin Rogue. Assassin, after having been buffed, is also, I think, in a vacuum, the most powerful of the 3 rogue classes. Thief gets some other options when it's doing things with offhand attacks, but in particular, assassins get a ton of bonuses. So what do you actually get from being an assassin? Well, you get advantage on everything that hasn't acted in a turn yet, or hasn't acted in a combat yet, excuse me, which is very powerful both because it lets you hit and means that you can use your bonus action for something other than hiding and still gain advantage, and also because enemies you have advantage against, you can sneak attack. So you don't need an ally to provide you the ability to sneak attack. One of Rogue's weaknesses is that if your allies don't have great initiative, you will often win initiative, and then have to go first in a round before an ally can move up to support your character. If your allies do have good initiative, then you will be able to move them into base contact with an enemy ahead of your rogue's action. Something to keep in mind also, just as a side note, because I know people will call me out on this, if you all win initiative as a party, or if multiple characters win initiative or act on the same initiative, in Baldur's Gate, you get to choose what order they act in. So if your whole party has good initiative, you can move your melee character adjacent to an enemy, and then guarantee that you'll be able to sneak attack that enemy. Even if your rogue technically rolled higher, you'll still be able to move the fighter first. But if an enemy gets an initiative score in between you and your ally, you won't be able to move that ally into position, and so won't be able to make sneak attacks normally. Assassin Rogue gets around this issue by just being self-sufficient when it comes to triggering sneak attacks, because anything that hasn't acted in the turn, in the combat, you are going to have advantage against and be able to sneak attack. You also get critical hits against every surprised creature, and you're going to surprise enemies very often because you will often be starting combat from stealth, and that can apply surprise to groups of enemies, so extremely useful. Of course, also there's some dialogue choices you can use to gain surprise, but primarily this is going to be, again, stealth attacks against enemies who aren't expecting you to attack them. You get surprise, and then you get a round of combat where they're not acting, where you have advantage and automatic criticals against them. Of course, those criticals will multiply your sneak attack dice as well for even a more initial burst damage. And you also now restore your action and bonus action at the start of combat, basically giving you 2 attacks in the first round of combat, so long as you attack before combat starts. Huge bonus, and means that you are doing an insane amount of damage very, very early in the game. At this point, we're going to make a digression, because Assassin Rogue actually does not benefit that strongly from continuing to take levels in Rogue. Every second level you get another die of sneak attack, and you get some other minor boosts, but honestly, Rogue at level 3 has already gotten the best things from the class. I'm intending to do a video on this, so keep an eye out for it, about different breakpoints for different characters, different character classes. But for Rogue, a very typical breakpoint is level 3, because when you get your subclass access, that's kind of what you need from Rogue, and you can often move into another character class. In this case, the character class that we are going to move into is Ranger, and the reason for this, of course, is that we want to front-load more damage, and the other character that is best at front-loading damage is the Gloomstalker Ranger. For our favored enemy here, you should definitely take Ranger Knight. Even if you don't intend to wear heavy body armor, because it will give you disadvantage on stealth checks, and you have high dexterity, so you won't gain as much AC as other characters would. The Ranger Knight gaining access to heavy armor proficiency lets you wear helmets, gloves, and boots that have the heavy armor tag, which are all very valuable for your character, without having that problem of the heavy body armor. So this gives you a huge, significantly increased access to different items, many of which are actually very good for you. For Natural Explorer, you're going to want Wasteland Wanderer Fire, typically. Resistance to fire damage lets you resist the most commonly seen damage type in the game, and in Dungeons & Dragons generally, fire resistance is always good. It also is going to let you, if you, for example, start a fight by blowing up a barrel, you can resist that damage. And one thing that this character will get to do is use explosions and set up stuff out of combat, because you're going to be so stealthy all the time. You can do the barrelmancy tricks with more facility than other characters can, i.e. moving an explosive barrel next to an enemy before starting a combat, something like that. For our abilities, again, you don't really need anything in particular here. We already have the skills that we need. One thing to notice is that it does not show you your skill proficiencies from Rogue in this menu, so you do have to remember what you've already taken. Just worth keeping that in mind. But just fill out whatever you feel like your party needs access to. At level 2 Ranger, we get a fighting style, giving us archery fighting style, which is great for this character, of course. As a ranged attacker, you need the archery bonus to hit. This means that you will hit very reliably, even though we haven't gotten a dexterity increase yet at this point in the game. With the +2 to hit, we're going to be hitting very reliably, especially with advantage on all of our attacks. Excuse me 1 second, have to drink some water. My apologies, I'm recording this with a bit of a sore throat. Alright, then we are going to select spells, and so the spells that you want to take here are going to be Longstrider. Every party should have access to Longstrider. What this doesn't tell you in the tooltip is that this is a ritual, meaning that it does not take a spell slot to cast, and it lasts all day. So just having access to this means your whole party gets 10 feet of bonus movement speed for the entire day. That's incredibly valuable for this character. I should also mention that speaking of movement speed, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, if you are playing this character as not Astarion, then your best bets are going to be the Wood Elf, who gets stealth proficiency and who gets extra proficiencies and bonus movement speed, the Deep Gnome, who gets advantage on stealth checks as well as advantage on mental saving throws, which is incredibly powerful. Or the Halfling, just letting you reroll 1s. Many of your attacks are going to be made at like 90, 95, 98% to hit, and so rerolling 1s can actually be very valuable for this character, preventing the very few times you would miss on your attacks. And for our second spell, we're going to take Hunter's Mark. You usually are going to want to bonus action hide rather than cast Hunter's Mark, but the times when it comes up, this extra 1d6 of damage is very good, and if you get a critical, it's an extra 2d6 of damage, so that's pretty nice. And it lasts all day, so you can transfer it from character to character at any time during the day, making sure that you always have additional damage, even without spending too many spell slots. So this is just a very useful additional damage boost to have. Especially because in our opening round of combat, we're now going to be making 3 attacks, because we are going to take the Gloomstalker Ranger. Gloomstalker is one that suffers from another bad tooltip, just like the Longstrider tooltip, because you have the Dread Ambusher feature. Gives you a +3 to initiative, already very good. Winning initiative means that you are more likely to have advantage on your attacks, because remember, enemies that haven't acted yet, you have advantage against them. And also, of course, winning initiative is just good for a host of other reasons, but even more important for this character. But also, on your first turn of combat, your movement speed increases by 10 feet, and you can make an attack that deals an additional 1d8 damage. What this tooltip doesn't tell you is that that's an extra attack. It does not take an attack action or an action of any kind, actually. You can do this and take a different action as well as a different bonus action. and it does an extra d8 of damage. So that means in your opening round of combat, you're doing an additional attack plus the one you did before combat starts. So you're already doing 3 attacks in the first round of combat, applying sneak attack, very likely to be applying critical hits on some of those. So your average damage in your opening round of combat is already ridiculous, and it only gets better from here. You get also another bonus action hide, which is redundant with the rogues one, so unfortunately there is a little bit of redundancy there, but that's okay. Umbral Shroud, letting you become invisible if you're obscured, is fairly useful. This is relatively free, and there are some cases where it can let you get into a good position in combat before combat starts. Just having out-of-combat access to invisibility gives you basically free reign to move around most arenas before the combat begins, letting you pick the optimal place to start combat from. For our spell selection here, at this point there's not a lot that you really need. You could take Cure Wounds just to have access to some healing. You could take Fog Cloud. Fog Cloud is a little buggy in the current version, but is very good for ranged attackers once they fix the bug. So how this is supposed to work is that if you're standing in it, enemy ranged characters will not be able to attack you. Currently, that does not seem to be the case. I've seen, if you watched my Honor Mode playthrough, you saw my characters getting attacked in the middle of fog clouds, and enemies not respecting the fog cloud at all, and I've seen other people reporting this as a bug. So currently, this seems to be bugged. When they fix fog cloud, this is going to be a very powerful option. How you use this spell is you cast it on yourself, you stand in the middle of it, so enemies cannot attack you at range, and then you step out of it to fire, and then step back into it before ending your turn, making you perfectly immune to ranged attacks. That being said, you will want to be a little careful with this one right now, because it, in the current version, as of the date of recording here, seems to be bugged. At Ranger level 4, we get access to a feat, and the feat that we are going to take is actually not an ability improvement, because our hit chances should be very good every turn of combat, basically. We have Archery Fighting Style, and we have advantage on every attack. We're going to take Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter gives you an attack penalty, so one reason that Astarion is so good for this character is that you offset the penalty with Astarion's happy buff from having him drink some blood. You can offset that penalty by 1 point, then you offset it an additional point by your Archery Fighting Style, and then you gain advantage on all your attacks. So you're still going to be quite likely to hit your attacks, and every attack will do an additional 10 damage. Given that we're doing 3 attacks in the opening round of combat at this point, that's an additional 30 damage to an enemy before they ever get a chance to act. Incredibly powerful. You can also toggle this off if your hit chance looks really bad, but I will say that almost always the math works out that you will do more average damage leaving this on, even if the hit chance is very low. So that's something to keep in mind. It does feel bad to miss those attacks, but typically you're going to do more average damage leaving Sharpshooter on 100% of the time. Also worth mentioning is that when you are starting a combat, if you miss an enemy, they often won't notice your presence. It's only if you hit them that will actually start a combat, so you'll get a few chances to try to hit them, even if you have bad hit chances thanks to Sharpshooter. But again, I should emphasize that you will almost always prefer to leave this on all of the time, because that gives you the best chance of, or the best average damage per round. At Ranger level 5, we get access to Extra Attack, of course very important for this character, and also Misty Step, although we will not be keeping this level of Ranger forever. Something that I should have mentioned earlier as well, and forgive me for the slightly out of order thing, I will put timestamps for this so it'll be a little easier for everyone, is that this build does involve 1 respec in order to reach its final form. This leveling order is the best leveling order, and then when we hit level 11, we're going to respec back down to a lower level in order to maximize the character. Here we are going to pick up, usually Spike Growth is the best, just good for ranged characters. You can block enemy melee characters from reaching you. You could also take Pass Without Trace, which gives you +10 to stealth checks. It conflicts with other concentration spells, but it does last all day, and you're unlikely to lose concentration on stuff because you typically will not be taking damage on this character. So you just don't need to worry about losing concentration or making concentration checks. Having plus 10 bonus to stealth checks is very powerful, allowing you to maintain your superiority in terms of being out of combat the entire time. So when you make an attack, you make a stealth check versus the enemy's perception to see if they can sense your presence, and if they don't, you just get another free attack. You can just keep attacking until they eventually see you. So this is very powerful for taking out groups of enemies without them ever knowing you're there. Here we're going to go back to Rogue to pick up a feat, and we'll just take an ability improvement. Getting up to 18 dexterity. And then at this level we're going to actually multi-class again, because we have all of the things that we need from both Rogue and Ranger. And we are going to go into Fighter. Fighter gets you a fighting style, in this case defense, because we already have archery, so defense is going to be the most useful of the remaining ones, and plus 1 bonus to armor class is always good. And then you get Action Surge, bringing your total attacks in the opening round of combat up to 6, because you're going to attack once from out of combat, or occasionally twice. Then, when combat begins, you have your normal attack, plus your extra attack from being a level 5 Ranger. Then you get your Dread Ambusher attack, so that's 4 attacks, and then you Action Surge to make 2 more attacks. Action Surge isn't like Haste, so in Honor mode, Haste and Potions of Speed are nerfed. You can't benefit from extra attack on those extra actions that you get from Haste and Potion of Speed. You can only make 1 attack with those, but Action Surge you can still make 2 full attacks. It just counts as a full action. So you'll be able to make 6 attacks on your opening round of combat. That's 60 damage from Sharpshooter, that's an extra 30 damage-ish from your bow, that's an extra 24 damage just from your dexterity, and then of course your sneak attack and any additional damage riders that you have. This character of course also benefits very strongly, because we're making so many attacks, from having anything that increases our damage, especially anything that rolls dice, so keep an eye out for items that give you extra damage dice, because those will be doubled by your critical hits. Finally, at Battlemaster Level 3, you get maneuvers, and the maneuvers that we are going to pick are Menacing Attack, because this can keep melee enemies at range. Precision Attack, because this, again, helps offset the Sharpshooter penalty. And either Trip Attack or Disarming Attack. Personally, I prefer Trip Attack. It can also slow enemies, and it can help out your allies by giving melee allies advantage. So this is the build up to this point, but then in order to maximize our character at level 12, I think you're going to want to make a respec. This build only reaches 2 feats, and so we can actually get those in a slightly more efficient way, while still getting everything we need from Rogue and Ranger, and getting a few more hit points and things too. So we're gonna just talk to Withers, and I will quickly run through the character respec. We will still start with Rogue for skill access, although you could choose to start with one of the other classes, but this gives you the best skill access. You don't have to change like any of the skills that you've been using throughout the game. You won't have to change. And then we go to level 3 Rogue. We get access to Assassin. No more decisions here. Take Ranger as well. Making sure that we take Ranger Knight. You may be asking, why do we need to take this heavy armor proficiency if we're taking Fighter later? And that's the reason is that this is fairly confusing. The way this works, if you multi-class into Fighter, if you start as a Fighter, you get access to heavy armor. And if you multi-class into Fighter, you only get access to medium armor. So in order to gain access to heavy armor, we need to get it from another source, in this case Ranger Knight. Then we will take Gloomstalker, making sure that we get access to everything, and again making all the same decisions that we did before. And then this is where the build deviates. We're going to go straight into Fighter. And the reason that we want to do this as a respec rather than starting this way is that this delays access to your feats all the way to the end of the build. So this version of the character takes much longer to come online. We get 3 maneuvers here, getting access to Menacing Attack, Precision Attack, and Trip Attack. Then we get our feat, and we're going to take Sharpshooter. And then we get extra attack from Fighter level 5, so that's why we don't need to reach Ranger level 5. And then at Fighter level 6, we get another feat. The reason you do it this way is it's a few more hit points, slightly better access to other things. And you still get 2 feats this way, which is just overall a slight optimization to the end game build, but it takes longer to come online. In terms of itemization for this build, you are going to want, of course, the best bow you can find. One that is worth mentioning is the Titan String Bow, which I don't currently have, but the Titan String Bow lets you add your strength to your damage, so then you could use an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength to make every attack do 5 more damage, or use this Club of Hill Giant Strength that you can find in the Underdark as your main hand weapon, and then you'll still have an elixir slot for something like an Elixir of Bloodlust. Either of those will increase your flat damage output significantly. You still do benefit very heavily from Elixirs of Bloodlust, even though they were nerfed in Honor Mode. They're still very good, and of course in Tactician difficulty or below, it's going to be your best option for increasing your damage. Potions of Speed are also still very valuable for you. Additional attacks are just really strong for any character that's applying Sharpshooter, because even though this is only a single extra attack on Honor Mode, it's still going to be a ton of extra damage, because every one of your attacks hits so hard. You will also want to make sure that you have a shield equipped, because you can gain the AC benefits of a shield while having a two-handed ranged weapon equipped. Because the game lets you freely switch between weapon sets, this is just to stop people from getting punished for forgetting to do that. It's still technically better to switch between your melee and ranged weapons at the end of your turn, so make sure that you have your melee weapon set equipped when it's not your turn, because then you can make attacks of opportunity, but either way you'll benefit from the shield. Also, any weapons with passive benefits, like the Knife of the Undermountain King, that reduces your chance needed for critical hits, are very good as melee weapons, because you can actually benefit from that while making ranged attacks. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that because you have good dexterity and medium armor access, or even heavy armor access, but medium armor access in this particular case, you can use the armors that let you add your full dexterity modifier plus a shield, giving you very good AC. With 24 AC here, we're ahead of where characters in plate armor would be, so we actually have the highest AC values in the game on this kind of character with the medium armors that let you apply your full bonus. Anything that increases your damage, and especially anything that adds dice to your damage, like these Stalker gloves, are really valuable. There's several other gloves that add a d4 of damage to your weapon attacks. That's extremely powerful for this character, and something that you should keep an eye out for. Of course, any bow that increases your damage or has elemental damage attached to it is very good as well. And one other thing that is worth mentioning as well for this character is that because you only reach 18 dexterity, you're one of the best candidates in the game to dump dexterity and instead use the Gloves of Dexterity. In that case, you would take 8 dexterity for your starting stats and put those points elsewhere in the build. Either Charisma, Wisdom, Intelligence. Probably Wisdom is what you would max, and then add in the Gloves of Dexterity, and that would get you access to another feat. The other feat that you should take if you're using the Gloves of Dexterity is Alert, because winning initiative is so important for this character. It also makes you immune to the couple fights where you do get surprised for story reasons, and that's extremely powerful as well, because this character really suffers from being surprised. You want to be doing the surprising, not getting surprised. A typical turn in combat, you're going to want to start with this character's stealth, whether you are part of a party or solo, you're going to want to start with this character stealthed, and then you're going to want to initiate any combats by having them make the attack. So that will surprise the enemies, and allow them to regain their action before combat starts, getting your extra action in combat, so you will typically fire that. Also, something that's worth keeping in mind is that you can use the special arrows. These do additional elemental damage, and so benefit very strongly from critical hits, because the 2d8 fire damage, 2d4 fire damage, gets doubled if you have a critical hit, which you are guaranteed to do against surprised enemies thanks to this build. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Stealth Archer, or Assassin Rogue, and as always, if you have, do please feel free to leave a comment, like the video. Both of those things help a ton with the algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more honor mode build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.